Amanda McKinney. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today. Thank you for being here.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for having me. Seeing your face bright and early in the morning for me is seriously the highlight of my day. And it's going to take me into having a wonderful day today.
Oh, well, the feeling is very, very mutual. So please, can you tell folks a little bit about who you are and what you're up to in this world?
Absolutely. If no one knows my name is Amanda McKinney, and I like to say that I am a marketing and business coach for yoga teachers. And that allows me to help yoga teachers really grow their business in a way that feels right for them in a very authentic way. So that's really where I come from in terms of helping yoga teachers. But really, what ends up happening is I'm their cheerleader and their coach, depending on what they need in that moment. Because I like to say that I'm a natural born cheerleader and I've always been that way and a learned coach. So along the way, I have picked up some tools that allow me to help people move forward in the trying to achieve a goal, any kind of goal, whether it's business or life. And that's what I just love seeing people do, because what I notice is that there's a lot of shoulds in this world. I should be doing this, or I have to do this. And my thing is, heck no, you don't. You don't have to do anything. We want to find what works for you. And so that is where I live and breathe in this online space.
Oh, I love that. Can we dive into the shoulding on ourselves a little bit?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Where do you see that coming up for your clients the most?
I hear it a lot because I do focus on marketing. And most people that come to me show up on my, online doorstep, right? And they're like, Amanda, I know I should be posting on Instagram. I know I should be doing this. And where I believe that is coming from is such a great place, actually, because what's happening is, whether it's a yoga teacher or not, someone who's trying to grow a business is searching for information about how to grow that business or how to achieve a goal, no matter what they're doing. And they're looking online and they're finding free information, which, again, fantastic way that we can learn is by free information. The tough part is that when we receive free information on Google, there's a lot of it, and that's a lot of noise. And it's a lot of people trying to say, including myself, right? I have a podcast, I have all this free resources that say, here's 3 steps to post on Instagram or something, right? And so we receive this free information that's trying to help us take a step towards our goal. But then it's overwhelming because there's so much of it.
Mhm.
And so we start to feel like we have to do a lot of things. So I think part of it is learning. So it's a great thing that we're doing. And then the other part is comparison.
Mm.
And that is a tough one, because I'm speaking directly as a business owner and for business owners right now, but it could be for anything, that when we are trying to achieve something, whether it's grow a business or anything else, we look at what other people are doing. And that's a wonderful thing too, right? It's great to look at what other people are doing to see they've walked this path before. Maybe I can learn something from them. That's great. The trouble is when we start thinking, I have to do what they did, or they're doing more and I should be doing more. So that's where I think it comes from. What do you think?
Yeah, that the comparison one kind of got me a little bit, because I'm like, that's not a place I normally find. I don't normally find myself in a place of comparison. I'm very lucky in that way. However, with this book cohort thing, I'm now in a cohort of other people who are doing exactly the same things as I'm doing. And I'm like, well, they just got that podcast. They just landed that podcast, or it looks like they're selling a lot of books, or their book is live on Amazon right now, and mine's only in the ebook format. And I'm like, whoa, Alisha, let's just take this down a notch.
Mhm. But it's so hard. I mean, it's one of those things, like we can recognize it, which is awesome. And we say, take it down a notch. But how hard is that? I mean, it's so easy to say that, but it's so dang hard to actually do that action. And so it's like everyone, including ourselves, we need this reminder that we don't have to do everything that everyone else is doing. And I also think that we have to remember that not we don't have to share everything online. right? We don't have to share everything. I don't, you don't, anyone listening, we don't have to share everything online. And so we also need to remember that the people that we're seeing do these things, whether it's in the book cohort or someone on Instagram or someone's email list, that they're not sharing the whole story either. And that's okay. They're allowed to not share the whole story. But we have to remember it, which is a hard thing to remember when we're only seeing however much percentage of the story they're sharing.
Right. And that's such a beautiful reminder. Oh, it's the reminder to go with the flow and your intuition. And I'm not saying don't like just ignore the things that we need to be doing, because there are those things that we don't want to do that we do
Right.
need to do. But that reminder that listening to our intuition and going with the flow is typically the best way to go.
Absolutely. And anyone who is in my bubble, and if I catch that, if they're starting to say something, I try really hard to share that reminder and say, I think you should, I don't even like saying that word, but I would encourage you to stop following that person for just right now,
Right.
or unsubscribe from that person's email list, or pause that person or mute that person on social media. It doesn't mean anything bad. All it means is that in this season, we need to not hear that or see that message right now. We can always come back to it, because really, at least for me, I'm no therapist. I make sure I say that all the time. Like, I am not a therapist at all. I'm just seeing what I do and what my students do as well. That when we fall into the comparison trap, we're doubting ourselves. This is what's really happening here. Yes, we're seeing like, oh, I should be doing this, or I should be doing more. But when we really do that, it's kind of like that thing of like, when we point the finger, we've got 4 fingers pointed back at ourselves, of like, we're doubting what we are doing and not super grounded in that. So I would say, pause the looking at other people and really turn inward and say, well, where did this come from?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I really love that. I need to noodle on that for a second. So when we're comparing, what is
I
that
like the
word?
word.
When we're comparing in that way, we're doubting ourselves and we're doubting what we are doing.
Yeah, because if you think about it, and keep on noodling for sure,
Yeah.
but if you think about it, when we are super confident in something, it doesn't matter what someone else is doing. Like, I work with yoga teachers, so all of my examples will typically be like this, but it can be said for anything. So if you're standing on your yoga mat in a class with a whole bunch of people, if you are super grounded and super confident in yourself, you're actually not even looking at other people and what they're doing. If you're not super confident in what you are able to do on the mat or not do on the mat, right? If you aren't, you're looking over and seeing, oh, so and so over here is doing this thing way better than me.
Right. Right. I'm gonna, what this is kind of hitting in me, and my life is only things to do with the book right now, is what it
Right,
feels
of
like. So
course.
everything is a book example, but there's kind of a mentor that I work with within the program, and he suggested, like, he helped me get on some podcasts that I don't even know that I wanted to get on,
Right.
and that I said yes to. And I didn't necessarily feel great in those interviews. And I didn't feel great promoting those interviews. And I only said yes because I was doubting myself and I love this example. And I was seeing what other people were doing and trying to, like, I need to get on all of these podcasts. Well, no, my gut had told me from the beginning, Alisha, just go on the podcasts that feel in alignment with who you want to work with.
Mm-hmm.
And this conversation right here is that beautiful reminder. And I'm hoping this conversation will spark an example in the person listening right now who is like, oh yeah, that's where I'm comparing myself, and that I need to listen to my own intuition and not doubt myself.
For sure. And again, so much harder to do in real life than to say it. And I feel like I can speak about this so clearly because I do it. right? Like I just want to be really clear. Sometimes we listen to, this is the same thing of like comparing ourselves to others. I hear this a lot. And so I actually talk about when I fail, when I fall down, when I mess up, when I compare myself, when I talk about these types of things all the time, because what I realized 2-3 years into business was that people, for some reason, thought that I didn't deal with these things because I show up confidently when I talk or whatever the case may be. And so I call attention to it. So just so everyone knows, I can speak about this because I do it all the time. And I remember early on in my business where I was like, I just want to get on these top rated podcasts. This is what I want to do. And I had this list, right? And I was actually able to get on one of them, which was remarkable. Like I only made one of the major lists that I wanted. And here's the interesting thing. I didn't see a growth in my business at all. I didn't see growth on my email list. I didn't see anything. And so the marketer in me is super data driven. So then I go back and I'm like, what the heck just happened? Did I blow the interview? Like what happened? And the answer is it wasn't my audience. It wasn't the right people, even though that podcast had huge numbers. And sure, maybe someone could Google it and I would show up in the Google search. So it did help me there. It didn't help me gain students. It didn't help me gain email subscribers, which in the marketing world is what you're really trying to go for. And whereas like I could be on, I'm using air quotes for everyone listening, a smaller podcast, right? Like there's really not big, small, like in my opinion, but you know, when you're ranking things, you kind of look like this top rated podcast is what I want to be on or whatever. And so I would get on a smaller podcast and I would see email subscriber, like a growth in email subscribers or people reaching out saying it was so good to hear you talking about this. And it was because I knew my audience. And it was because I knew, like you were saying, like that interview felt great. This one feels amazing, right? Like this one feels great. I could do this all day long, but you show up to those other ones and you're like, this is not my people.
Right. And you can feel it and you know it. And
right.
Yeah, I'm fascinated by that. And, you know, the language that I typically use is like, follow your intuition, trust your gut, go inward. But when I back that up and the part of me that wants the research and the data, when I like have to like retroactively get that and figure it out, it is exactly what you're saying. It's like, those are the quote unquote, like I'm a smaller podcast. We'll just start there. Like Yoke and Abundance Podcast. It's a smaller air quote, smaller podcast, but I can tell you that the people listening, I know who they are. And so I can tell that that person who's going to be the guest, I can tell you, these are the types of people who are listening. And I know they're going to go follow you. And I know they're going to like all of those things. And when you do get on the bigger podcasts, you don't know that. And you can't directly connect the dots the way you can with the smaller podcasts. And so that was very much similar to an experience that I just had.
Right. And to be clear, I think it's really cool when we can hit those big milestones of like, oh my gosh, the person said yes. Because the answer is always no if you don't ask.
Right.
So I'm giving myself and yourself and anyone else kudos right now when you are able to get to those accomplishments of the person said yes. Oh my gosh, I'm going to be on this podcast. Like it's all an experience. It's amazing.
Social proof, you know, like.
Yes, there are benefits, but it's just interesting. And, you know, I am much more analytical than I am gut driven because of my marketing background. Now, I have very much learned to follow both. I think it's like 50-50 now. When I started my business, it was definitely not 50-50. I was more data driven, which is, again, a benefit when I'm looking at marketing, right? Like I can look at some statistics and be like, okay, here's what we need to do. And that's why people hire me to help them, right? Like that's the benefit. But I have learned to play with both of those and really understand what's the initial reaction from my body. And I think it was Marie Forleo that talked about this at some point. Like, if you say something, does your body literally like lean towards it?
Like I'm like leaning towards you as you talk.
Right. Yeah. And I've noticed that, like, I thought it was complete crap when she first said it, like when I first heard it, and I was like, is that like, am I going to swim in that pool right now? And what I've noticed is that I can actually see and feel that way more because I'm tuned into it. So I don't think it's crap. I think it's awesome. But I marry the two
Right.
of I definitely know what my gut says, and I go against it sometimes, and I go with it sometimes. And the data is there, and I always check it too. And sometimes I go with it, and sometimes I go against it. So I think there's benefits in both sides,
Yeah.
but and it just depends like which one is going to win. Like sometimes you're like, I'm just getting a weird vibe from that person. I like that one is going to lean a little bit closer. But if it's like, do I want to do this thing when I look at the data and it's clear what I should do? If I don't really want to do it, I probably will because the data's like, Amanda, this is a good business decision.
Well, okay. So once you and I were speaking last week, I believe it was, and you told me a tidbit about yourself that you love the water.
Yes.
So I want to go woo for it with you for a second.
Bring it on. Bring it on.
I'm curious. I know that you love the water. You need to be close to the water. And I'm curious how you feel like, do you feel, are you a water sign? I'm curious.
I don't know. I don't know that.
I don't always know if signs are water signs, but like I'm a Scorpio. What is
I'm
your
a Leo.
a Leo? I don't know what Leos are. I'm gonna have to research that. But how do you think water and flow has affected business for you, and does it?
It affects me personally to my core. So, and I think because I'm running this business, it therefore affects the business. So for me, and what I like to say is that all I have to do is be near water and my nervous system calms down. Some people, this is the opposite. I totally realize that there's a lot of people in this world that are not that same feeling about water. But I grew up and was born and raised in Florida. So I like to say I was basically born in the water, like next to a pool, in the ocean, on the river. Like I was a water baby. And so I'm sure that there's something there, right? Of like, it was so much part of how I grew up that being around water was just, maybe it was just how I soothed myself. The other thing I've learned about myself is swinging. So like, if I go to a park, you can't stop me from running to the swing. I am like a child when I get to a park. And I used to do it in college when I would get really stressed out about a test. I would go down to like the neighborhood park and swing. And so the movement is what is in both of those. So that would be my guess as to why it's so calming for me. And so how this has impacted my business is I have allowed myself to tap into that feeling when I am around water and be creative for business. So how this could look is when I go home, because I don't live in Florida anymore, I live in Oklahoma. When I go home, I know exactly where I want to go eat because it's on the water, like several restaurants. Like I know exactly where I want to go. And I'll take my notebook and jot down ideas because I know I'm going to have them when I'm there. Being at my mom's house and being in the pool. Like I do so much work at my mom's house because I'm just sitting out on the porch and in and out of the pool, right? And then over the years, my husband and I have been incredibly fortunate to be aligned in that we want to be around water. Like he isn't as in tune as I am to that feeling. I shouldn't say he's not in tune. I just don't think it's as strong. And so we have made a plan and actually put a pool in our backyard over the last year. So this is the first summer we're experiencing it. And I'm already so excited. Like every afternoon I get to go and just like put my feet in the water and then I can walk back in and do some more work. So it has impacted my business. And I feel really fortunate that we were able to do that.
Isn't it interesting how like that's the smallest moment of being able to have a pool is to be able to like go put your toes in the water, get your feet wet, like having that teeny tiny moment. And it's like, I would bet if I asked you what's the best part of having a pool, like it's that, right? It's like being able to have that teeny tiny moment every day.
Yes, and several times a day. So like it's so cool. I work from home. I have a home office. So when I'm having a moment of like I need to get up and walk outside or whatever, I can now walk into my backyard and put my feet in the water and just dangle my feet there for a little bit. Again, the movement is super helpful. And 2 minutes, 5 minutes later, I come back in and I get back to writing. And that's all I needed. It's like that is the restorative yoga for me sometimes.
Yeah. I 100% get that. I was mentioning to you last week that I got stand-up paddle boards for my VIP days, and I've literally been out on the stand-up paddle boards recently, like thinking I'm getting ready to start writing book number 2, right? And so I've been thinking like, is there a way that I can safely bring my laptop out on the stand-up
Right.
paddle board? I've gone there.
Good luck with that. I don't know. But what you could do is you could get like a journal or something that you could write. And people have told me this same thing with like, I have the best ideas in the shower. I don't know about you, but in the shower, I can solve the world's problems. And I have these ideas. And so I tell this story pretty frequently with my students is that like poor Michael, that's my husband's name. I'll be in the shower and I'll say, Michael. And I'm like screaming, right? So he can hear me. And he runs in like thinking something's wrong. And he's like, I need you to write something down for me. Like, I need you to write something. I just had this idea. I need you to write something down. And he's like, okay, I'm glad you're alive and not having some problem. And so people have told me that there are waterproof pads you can put in the shower. You could take it on the paddleboard.
Yes. Yes. Although I really need the computer.
I'm the same, but I mean, it could be your backup of like,
it could be my backup. I'm actually due for a new computer. So part of me thinks like, I'll just back it up.
Yeah. Just
put it in a plastic bag.
Yeah.
Just take it with me. And then this will just be oh, well.
Right. If it happens, it's time to get a new computer.
Right. Yeah.
I love it.
We'll see. Okay. You told me, this is an intuition thing. I feel like I want to go there. You speak often, and you told me a story about how recently you gave a presentation that you did not feel like went well. And that's not necessarily the feedback you were getting, but that's how you felt inside, and it led to something else. And I really love this story. So I'm wondering if you can share it with listeners.
I would love to share this story. I think it's one of those times where I'm really proud of myself for listening to the intuition. And it was really interesting how it happened. So thank you for letting me share this story. I'm really excited about sharing it. So recently I was at an event and I was asked to speak, and there were 2 different times I was speaking, which was really interesting. Typically it doesn't work like that. It's just one time. But I was at this event and I had a workshop on Friday and then a presentation on Sunday. So I had some time in between. The workshop I was co-teaching with someone else. So Shannon Crow and I were teaching it together. And shout out to Shannon. She's fabulous. And so we were teaching together, and she taught the first part. I taught the second part with us talking in between. And part of it, like when I walked away, I'll just say this at the beginning of like, when I walked away, I was like, that was terrible. That was not the best Amanda, which I was really sad in that moment because I was like, these people deserved the best Amanda to show up. And I don't know that that was the best Amanda that showed up. And so I was really sad about it. And I was really beating myself up. So Shannon and I walk away from the presentation or from the workshop, and we always do a debrief. I mean, that's the smartest thing to do as a presenter, as a teacher in any way, of like what went well, what didn't, especially when you're working together. So we always do that. And so we walked away, and so we walk outside and I say, Shannon, I'm sorry. Like, I'm really sorry. I feel like that was not the best version of me that showed up. Like, I'm just really sorry. And she looked at me like, what? And she was like, I think you're being really mean to yourself right now. And I was like, I felt like I was really off my game. I don't think I was impactful. And I was really ruminating in this
Mm.
space. And she was great. To be very clear, like I'm so lucky to have her. She was wonderful because what she did is she was like, Amanda, you are really beating yourself up and you're looking at what I did and thinking it was fantastic and saying like what you did was bad. And that's not the case at all. You were teaching something totally different. And I was teaching like advanced marketing stuff because we were in the second half of the day. Like that's what they have paid for. Like I was showing up with my A game from a marketing standpoint. But where I felt like I fell short was the true Amanda, which I know now. I didn't know in that moment, right?
Mm.
The true Amanda is way more inspirational and motivational and not as tactical when I'm speaking to new people. But I wanted to give them so much value. So I was giving them all the tactical things like you could do this or this or this. And I got in the weeds. And so I think that while I was standing there and seeing their faces, I thought it was going terribly. What I think was happening and what I know was happening because I've talked to a few of them since then is they were just taking it in and it was a lot of information and it was after lunch. So let's like, I have to take all these things in. So that's what Shannon was able to help me with. But the cool part about this is that I had that moment and I knew something was off. And so while I wasn't teaching on the same thing again on Sunday, it was similar. And the title of the presentation on Sunday was Creating Your Thriving Yoga Business. And so what I did, because I was so thankful that I had named it that and not like 3 steps to using Instagram, right? Like I was so thankful that I had named it what I really believe in, which is helping people create a thriving business, thriving for them, right? Not anyone else, thriving for them. And so I leaned into that. So everything that I had planned for Sunday, out the window. I started from scratch. So after that experience on Friday, I stayed up really late, which was not probably the smartest thing, but it was in my brain. And I was like, I got to do this.
You were
And
going to ruminate on it anyway, right?
right,
Like you're going to stay up ruminating.
yeah, I was going to think about it. So I might as well be working. So I pull out the laptop and I'm like, let me just get down in a Google Doc what I would love for Sunday to be. How do I want to feel? Because I don't want to feel like this. That's what I know. And so I got it down into a Google Doc. And then the next day I worked on like the super simple slides. Because that was the other thing I realized was like, I can speak all the time. I don't need slides. On Friday, I was really reliant on the slides. So it was almost like I was forcing myself to speak on something that I didn't really want to talk about, is what I felt like. So on Sunday, I spoke from Amanda. Like, I mean, it was all Amanda. It was, yes, here's some marketing information, but what I really want you to know is that you get to define what success means for you, period. End of story. You don't have to chase anyone else's dreams. You get to define this for yourself and then figure out what marketing feels right for you. And therefore, you will have the thriving business of your dreams. Friend, it was wonderful. It was phenomenal. I spoke for 3 hours and it went by like 10 minutes. I loved every second of it. It was phenomenal. I want to do it again and again and again. I wish that I could have done it 5 more days in a row. It was one of those moments that I was like, I want to feel like this. This was the true Amanda shining. And I was able to do it in a way. I don't think it was perfect by any means. Someone's listening and they're like, I was there on Sunday and it's not perfect. I don't think it was perfect, but I feel like it was so much more authentic to me. And I'm very grateful that a lot of people that were in the Friday session also came to Sunday. And I was like, okay, good, good. They get to see me. So I feel really good about it. And to be clear, I talked to people that were in the room for both Friday and Sunday, and both were very happy. So I think I'm queuing it up to make it sound like Friday was a train wreck. It actually wasn't, but inside.
I didn't think it was a train wreck. Not that I was there, but like I got okay, so I wanted you to tell the story for so many reasons. One, it's because okay. Well, you and I think talked about this before we started. So many people just share the highlight reel
Right.
of what's going on. And so we think that that person has never had a misstep. They never feel like shit after giving a presentation. They never feel like, we don't see those behind the scenes things because that's not what's traditionally put out there. So
Right.
you were giving us the behind the scenes feelings around something that was probably, like your friend said, probably you were being very hard on yourself. However, there was that intuition, which was probably the intuition of, this is incongruent with who I know I'm supposed to be for these people.
Right. You're
And
spot on right now.
yeah, and you acknowledged that. First it came up in that icky feeling, but that icky feeling often, if we get investigative around it, gives us a lot of information. And that icky feeling might be pushing us towards our best self if we're willing to drop the shame around it to
Yes.
get to the heart of what's happening, right?
Oh my gosh, I could not have said that better myself. Like you just nailed that so much, because had I not had Shannon right there, I don't know that I would have that same feeling, right? I wouldn't have the same story. I was so thankful that I talked to someone else about this. Now, maybe everyone else listening doesn't need that. For someone who maybe isn't super great at knowing the intuition, I feel like I'm getting better and better every day of my life, right? But it's not something that I've always followed. Some people really do that as a kid, and it's just part of who they are. I'm more analytical. And so I don't necessarily let that lead a lot. And so for me, I had that moment, and I'm so thankful I shared with a friend who was compassionate. I mean, she was like, "You're being a jerk to yourself. Like, can we not do this?" And she was like, "What would you tell me if I said this right now?" And I would, I would tell her all the great things she did. And the interesting part is, like, here I am, like beating myself up about this. And Shannon looks at me and she said, "Amanda, someone literally cried out of relief because of what you said in this workshop." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I had not that I didn't forget that moment. Like if that person's listening, like please know that moment was so impactful for me. But in the shame of what had happened in my brain, right? Of like, that was terrible. I was not good. I had forgotten that moment in that moment. And Shannon brought it back. I was so thankful. And so talking to someone else was really helpful for me. And then getting quiet for myself and saying, what do I really want people to walk away with in the next talk that I'm doing? And it was really easy for me to identify that. Like once I really thought about it, I was like, this is what I'd want. Because what happened on Friday was, at the end, like here I am teaching and doing all this stuff. Here's how to use Instagram. Here's how to do email, like all the tactical information that I truly believe they'll be able to use. But at the end, when I was like, oh shoot, I've only got 30 minutes or whatever it was, that was when I started doing all but you don't have to do all this, but you need to define success for you. It was the thing I couldn't leave that room without saying,
Mm.
that then became a 3-hour talk on Sunday.
Wow. That's incredible.
And so I'm just going to add to this because I'm like
Yeah.
watching your face right now. But from that moment, it made me realize how I could be a better coach about marketing. And so what I came back and I told everyone in my membership and anyone that I could really explain this to, I said, what would you do if I said, you can send me one sentence and I'm going to send it out to 1,000 people right now? What would that sentence be? Or if you had a moment with your dream student or with anyone, what would you not want them to walk away without knowing?
Mm.
That's your marketing, right? Like then it became, that's the message you really want to be the core message in your business. Of course, I'm talking about business owners, but like that can clue in on, like, if you only it's the whole thing of like, if you had 1 year to live, what would you do? If you, like, what would you do if you knew that you only had a small amount of time, words, whatever? And I think that's what it's like. If I had that moment, I know exactly what I would do. And I did it on that Sunday.
Well, the face you saw me making was like, this ties in so much to my book, to Little Failures, right? And I'm not calling what you did a failure. You get to
I
find
felt like
failure.
it was for sure.
But
Like in that moment, it really felt like a failure. So I think like myself, I would have classified that as a failure, even though I know now it wasn't. It felt like one. The emotion is real.
yeah, when I've been speaking recently, the thing that I keep saying, the message around little failures that I want to like, and this sentence isn't in the book anywhere. It's only something that I've come up with afterwards. But like, most people who are successful, I'd say 99% of people didn't become successful because everything worked out for them, right? They became successful because they had failure after failure after failure, and they didn't let them stop them. They learned and they iterated and they kept going, and they took that and they let that be compost for their vegetable garden of success, whatever you want to say, right? And that's not what I say, but it's like that our failures are our best kept success secrets. That's what I'm telling people. Like that's it. Like that's how we get successful.
Yes, I totally 100% agree. And it's like you and I were destined to be friends, I swear. It's interesting how much of what you teach is what I teach from a marketing lens. It's really interesting. Like everything is an experiment, and a lot of experiments end up in failure with the quote, right? Of like, but if you think about a scientist, they have to fail in order to succeed. Like no experiment has ever gone like, oh, that was perfect on the first try.
Amanda, it's so funny that you bring that up. I actually interviewed a woman who documents scientific expeditions at sea. Her name is Marley Parker. She's been on the podcast. She's like the most badass businesswoman, photographer, journalist I've ever met. She's so cool. And she specifically said, she's like, scientists don't fear failure, they plan for it.
Oh,
and I was like, holy shit. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
Right?
That is so true. That is so true. And you know what? It's interesting as I continue to work with just a vast array of people, which I love so much. Some of them are not analytical like me at all. And some are very analytical like myself. When I work with people, it's amazing how many people I have worked with that fall into this bucket. People who are engineers by trade, but also teach yoga on the side and would like to tip that scale. The engineers never have trouble testing things. They're willing to post on Instagram just to see if it works. They're willing to do this other thing. They look at it as an experiment, whereas the majority of my audience who is not as analytical really struggles with the experiment side.
Right, because they're trapped in the perfectionism side.
Yes. And I totally get it, because I fall into that too, especially when I'm comparing myself to other people, thinking that they did it once and it worked perfectly. But if we can tap into that, I'm just going to see what works. That's when we can find what really works for us. And so I love that experiment quote. Like, I'm going to make sure I remember this. Scientists do not fear failure. They plan for it.
Yeah. Yeah. Isn't that awesome?
Yes.
I love that so much. I love it so much. I've been giving it. I've been sharing it in all of the talks that I've been giving. And
so good. Thank you for sharing it with me today.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing your story with us today. Amanda, what else would you like to share with folks?
Oh, this is that question of like, what would you share? And I know exactly what it is. It's so fun to know this now. It's like, you can do this. I believe in you even when you don't believe in yourself, but I need you to take little steps towards whatever goal you're trying to reach right now, because it is capable and you will learn along the way, and the path might look different along the way. You might end up in a totally different place, but you're going to reach your version of success.
Mm.
That's what I would say.
I love that. Thank you for
And
sharing.
then I would give you a hug if we were in.
Oh, I would give you a hug too. Okay. And my final question for you is, how do you live a life of abundance?
It's so interesting. So I have to tell you this because I think you'll love this. So obviously I listen to your podcast and I listen to several interviews, and I know you asked that question. And so I've thought, I know she's going to ask me this question. What am I going to say? And so my husband and I take walks. We try every day to take a walk to kind of end the day, a work day. And so we were taking a walk one day and I said, I'm going to be interviewed on a podcast. And she asked this question, and I'm curious what you would say. Like, I was curious what he would say. And he quickly turned it around very quickly. And he was like, that's a great question. What are you going to say on the podcast? Like, you need to know your answer. And so I thought it was wonderful that he did that. And the answer that keeps bubbling up for me is, when I am fully present in the moment, I feel very abundant in whatever that is. Like you and me, this is all that exists right now. Like you and me talking, I am fully present. My phone is on airplane mode. I'll get the notifications in a few minutes when we get off this interview, right? Like it's just you and me. And I feel so abundant right now because of that. And so when I can truly tap into that, which is very hard for me to not live in the past or the future, when I can actually do it, oh girl, I'm so filled. I'm just bubbling up.
Okay. This makes like little, that feeling when like you're trying to hold back tears, like the little like pricklies in the back of your eyes. That's what I'm feeling right now, because I don't think I've ever said this, but so often the podcast guests that I have on the show, y'all always somehow give me my own medicine back to me in exactly what I need to hear when I need to hear it. And you just did that like so hard, because the past 3 weeks have been like nothing I've ever experienced. And I think a lot of it is because I have forgotten to be present.
It's so easy to do. I just want to tell you that because I just said it, like I am one to worry about the future more. I can actually compartmentalize and be like, okay, that's what happened. There's nothing I can do about it. But I worry so much about the future. And so to bring me in takes a lot of effort. It is not easy. And so I just want you to know, like, it's very easy to not be in the moment. In my opinion, it's so much easier to not be in the moment. It actually takes a lot of effort to do it.
Because when we're not in the moment, when we don't actively try to be fully present, it's a form of addiction. It's a numbing out. And so that reminder to just everything is fine in this moment right now.
Yeah. And it's really all we have. I mean, gosh, look at world events and it'll remind us of that so fast. We don't need to ruminate on that, of course, but it's like, being present in this moment and just believing in yourself in this moment and feeling the moment, even when it's crappy.
Yeah.
Again, you don't want to ruminate in the crap too much, but when the moment is crappy, feel the crappiness. And then stand up and work through the failure or the feelings of whatever happened so that you can have a better moment the next moment.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. This has my gears turning so much. Amanda, you're amazing. I hope we can do a part 2 with you, because
oh my gosh. Yes. Sign me up.
you're phenomenal. And thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thank you, Alisha. I really appreciate you.
Appreciate you.